What is up, guys? Randomonium here, and today we're going to be talking about battle mages. This video is a follow-up to my how to find your ideal playstyle, class, and subclass video, so if you haven't watched that one yet, I highly recommend it. In this video, we'll be covering Gangplank, Rumble, SWAIN, Fiddlesticks, Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Karthus, RYZE, Vladimir, and Malzahar. We will not be covering hybrid battle mages like Kennen, Lissandra, Brand, and Karma in this video. Kennen is covered in part 1 of my Marksman class video, Lissandra and Brand are covered in the Burst Mage video, and Karma is covered in the Enchanters video. Also, after his rework, Galli was much better defined as a Warden, so he will be covered in the Warden class video. Finally, I want to give a very special thank you to all the Battle Mage mains who helped me with this video. I've left a link to all of their subreddits in the video description below. Battle mages are one of the most diverse and unique classes in the game, so it's very hard to define what makes a battle mage a battle mage. In general, battle mages are medium-range champions that primarily rely on their spells to deal damage. While they may have some movement speed boosts, generally they have a very low ability to gap close or escape, and are some of the most common users of the Ghost Summoner spell. Battle mages also have some form of survivability, whether it's massive sustain, low cooldown shields, crowd control immunity or reduction, or powerful crowd control of their own. Finally, and most importantly, battle mages are high DPS champions, either from AoE abilities, damage over time abilities, or very low cooldown spammable spells. In general, battle mages can be broken into 3 groups: tanky, focused, and AoE. Tanky battle mages like SWAIN and Vladimir have unparalleled sustain and love to be in the center of a team fight. While they may not build purely defensive items, they can survive much longer than other mages. Focus mages are those who deal high DPS to a single target. This can be from damage over time spells like Malzahar, or from machine gun casters who spam spells like RYZE or Cassiopeia. Finally, we have the AoE battle mages. These champions deal massive amounts of AoE damage, but generally have less tankiness than the tanky battle mages, and less single target DPS than the focused battle mages. The champions that fall under this sector are Gangplank, Fiddlesticks, Aurelion Sol, and Rumble. In the center we have Karthus, who has a little bit of everything. He's a machine gun caster like RYZE and Cassiopeia, but his spammable spell is AoE, and all of his other abilities are AoE. And while he isn't as tanky as Vladimir or SWAIN, he excels in the center of a team fight thanks to his passive. The next chart shows how each champion primarily deals damage. As you can see, every battle mage primarily deals damage with their spells. Additionally, every battle mage primarily deals magic damage with the exception to Gangplank, who deals physical damage. The battle mages most commonly played in top lane are Gangplank, Rumble, and SWAIN. Additionally, Gangplank is considered a hybrid skirmisher. Both Gangplank and SWAIN can also be played in the mid lane, and Rumble can also be played in the jungle. The battle mage most commonly played in the jungle is Fiddlesticks, and he's also considered a hybrid disruptor. Fiddlesticks can also be played as support or as mid lane. The battle mages most commonly played in mid lane are Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Karthus, RYZE, and Vladimir. Karthus, RYZE, and Vladimir are also commonly played in top lane. Finally, the battle mage most commonly played as support is Malzahar, but he can also be played in the mid lane.
They're not just oranges, they're blood oranges.
Gangplank, the Saltwater Scourge. Gangplank is a hyper-scaling, late-game battle mage. There are few champions in the game that have a better late game than Gangplank. This is primarily because of his ability to get much more gold than other champions, thanks to Parlay. Gangplank also deals the most burst damage out of any battle mage in the late game since he can crit with his abilities, and with his barrel chains he can damage opponents further away than nearly any other battle mage. What Gangplank gives up for all this power is his early game. Gangplank has one of the weakest laning phases in the game. The goal of Gangplank in the laning phase is to survive and just farm up until late game. Additionally, a huge part of Gangplank's late game damage is tied to his barrels, which can be dodged or destroyed before Gangplank can detonate them. This makes Gangplank a very skill-oriented champion. If you have good barrel placement and good use of your ultimate, you can deal the most damage in the game, and if you have bad barrel mechanics, then you'll be next to useless. Gangplank is also considered a hybrid skirmisher because of his passive and because of his W, which gives him fantastic dueling power. Gangplank's W allows him to cleanse crowd control or debuffs on him and heals him a decent amount. This situational defense gives Gangplank huge outplay potential, allowing him to negate an opponent's most important crowd control. He also gains a speed burst when detonating his barrels, allowing him to chase down fleeing enemies or kite away from unfavorable fights.
Let's get in the fight!
Rumble, the Mechanized Menace. Rumble is one of the most unique battle mages in the game. He is the only champion in the game that uses a heat system, and it is proper use of this heat system that separates a good Rumble player from a bad one. Each of Rumble's abilities increase his heat, and if he overheats, then he's unable to use his abilities for a period of time. However, Rumble's abilities are much more powerful when his heat is greater than 50%. So the challenge of playing Rumble is keeping your heat above 50% so that you can deal maximum damage, while simultaneously not mindlessly spamming your abilities, which would cause you to overheat. Rumble can be an extremely strong lane bully and can outdamage most champions in the laning phase. Because he doesn't have any mana, he can also outlast many champions in the laning phase. This combination makes Rumble an extremely safe blind pick in the top lane since he has no true counters. Rumble also has some of the best pushing power of any top laner in the game. The disadvantage of all of this is that he has very low mobility, and since he default pushes the lane with his abilities, this can leave him susceptible to being ganked. In the mid and late game, Rumble is an amazing team fighter. The AoE damage on his flamethrower can shred through entire teams, and his ultimate is one of the most feared abilities in the game. What separates a good Rumble from a great one is proper positioning of your ultimate. Great Rumble players will consistently drop their ultimate in the most optimal location. Not only does Rumble's ultimate deal a scary amount of damage, but it also slows, allowing it to be used to slow pursuers or cut off an escape path for enemies. Rumble excels in teamfights around the choke points surrounding Baron and Drake, so if you have a Rumble on your team, always try to force your opponents to fight you in a constricted space.
If we approach strategically from the flank... Oh, who am I kidding? Let's just morph and eat them!
SWAIN, the Master Tactician. SWAIN is one of two sustained mages in the game, with the other being VLADIMIR. SWAIN deals a lot less raw damage than most other battle mages, but what he makes up for with this reduced damage is being extremely difficult to kill. A vast majority of SWAIN's power comes from his ultimate, which turns him into a monstrous bird that sucks the life essence from all nearby enemies. This constant AoE healing allows SWAIN to pretty much face tank an entire enemy team and still survive. In many ways, SWAIN plays very similar to a Juggernaut, which is why many people refer to SWAIN and VLADIMIR as Jugger mages. This is the true power of SWAIN. He deals enough AoE damage that he can completely turn a team fight, but his sustain is so powerful that it's extremely difficult to kill him. Furthermore, if an enemy team burns a lot of resources to get SWAIN low, he will usually just Zhonya's and continue to heal while he's in stasis. The disadvantages of SWAIN is that he's very immobile, most of his abilities have a very short range, and he's extremely reliant on the cooldown of his ultimate. SWAIN does best against teams that want to engage onto his team, but struggles against teams with long range and decent crowd control who are able to kite him effectively.
Your bidding, master.
Fiddlesticks, the Harbinger of Doom. Fiddlesticks is probably the most controversial addition to this video, since Fiddlesticks is not considered a true battle mage by Riot. Riot considers him one of the only champions in the game that doesn't fit into a particular class. However, after discussing the issue with Fiddlesticks mains, I feel like battle mage is the class that he most closely relates to, so that's why I've decided to include him in this video. Fiddlesticks is also considered a disruptor by many people because of his crowd control and AoE damage, which is why I also consider him a hybrid disruptor. Additionally, the build listed on the screen is for jungle Fiddlesticks only. Mid lane and support Fiddlesticks have completely different builds, so if you're interested in playing Fiddlesticks in one of those lanes, I recommend checking out the Fiddlesticks mains subreddit. Fiddlesticks is one of the most unique champions in the game. He has both a fear and a silence, two of the least common crowd control abilities in the game. Furthermore, He also has a channeled life drain ability, which is very unique. However, what really defines Fiddlesticks is his ultimate. Fiddlesticks' ultimate teleports him to a location after a short channel and causes him to deal a massive amount of AoE damage. Fiddlesticks thrives on creating chaos in team fights. He can jump into the enemy team with his ultimate from a brush or over a wall, silence the entire enemy team, fear one of their key damage dealers, and then Zonias before the enemy team can turn and kill him. Fiddlesticks can also be extremely frustrating in 1v1 situations. Good Fiddlesticks players can often bait enemies into diving a low-health Fiddlesticks under tower or chasing him into the jungle. Fiddlesticks can often turn these fights by fearing his enemy and then draining their life while simultaneously healing himself. Fiddlesticks is one of those champions that relies on mind games to be effective. He relies on positioning where the enemy team doesn't have wards to initiate with his ultimate, or to bait enemies into bad fights that he can turn with his crowd control and lifesteal. In the wrong hands, he can feel completely useless because he's incredibly squishy, but a skilled Fiddlesticks can feel impossible to kill with proper use of his abilities and proper management of his cooldowns.
I'm going to throw a star at you now. Good luck.
Aurelion Sol, the Star Forger. Aurelion Sol is a massive celestial dragon responsible for forging all the stars in the universe. He is essentially a god, and he has no qualms telling you about how amazing he is. In the early game, Aurelion Sol is known for his insane wave clear and roaming potential. With proper positioning, Aurelion Sol can clear a wave faster than pretty much any other champion, and his E allows him to roam to top lane or bot lane faster than any other champion as well. Essentially, Aurelion Sol doesn't win lane by killing his opponent. Instead, he wins lanes by forcing his lane opponent constantly under tower, and then roaming to other lanes to get his allies ahead. Aurelion Sol's damage primarily comes from the stars that circle him. If enemies are too close or too far away, then Aurelion Sol's damage is significantly reduced. This makes Aurelion Sol the most dependent champion in the game on positioning. Positioning is literally everything with Aurelion Sol, and it's what separates a good Aurelion Sol from a bad one. However, proper use of Aurelion Sol's Q and ultimate are what make a great Aurelion Sol player. Great Aurelion Sols are those who know when to precisely use their Q and their ultimate to gain maximum impact. If you want to learn positioning and roaming, there is no better champion than Aurelion Sol. He's an extremely difficult champion to master, but if you're able to tame this dragon, then you have an extremely powerful ally at your command.
There is no antidote for me.
Cassiopeia, the Serpent's Embrace. Cassiopeia is one of 3 machine gun mages in the game, with the other 2 being Karthus and RYZE. Machine gun mages have at least one spell on extremely low cooldown, which they spam in order to deal a significant amount of their damage. They're champions that rely very heavily on high actions per minute, so traditionally you need to have fast fingers and good ping in order to play them effectively. Cassiopeia differs from the other machine gun mages in that she is a poison mage. Both her Q and her W deal poison damage to targets over time. Her E is a spammable ability where she gets the majority of her damage. However, the base damage on her E is very low, but it's increased significantly if she's attacking a poisoned target. This makes Cassiopeia extremely reliant on hitting her poison abilities before engaging a target with her twin fangs. Cassiopeia's twin fangs also heal her if the target is poisoned, which gives Cassiopeia great sustain in fights, and if her twin fang kills a target, it refunds the mana cost, making it extremely effective for last-hitting minions. Additionally, Cassiopeia's Q gives her a very nice movement speed buff when it lands, which allows her to chase or kite, further stressing how important it is to hit your poison abilities with Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is also one of the only champions in the game that can ground a target, making it impossible for a champion to use movement abilities or even flash. This can make Cassiopeia a great situational pick against team comps with multiple dashes or blinks on their team. Furthermore, Cassiopeia's ultimate is fantastic against teams that try to engage on her, stunning every enemy that is facing her. Proper use of her W and her ultimate is often what separates good Cassiopeias from great ones. Another huge advantage of Cassiopeia is her scaling. Cassiopeia's passive makes it so that she doesn't have to buy boots, which allows her to buy an additional damage item in the late game. A full build Cassiopeia can deal some of the highest DPS in the game. However, Cassiopeia is a very immobile champion with a shorter range than most other mages, and with extremely conditional abilities. All burst mages and artillery mages outrange her, which allows them to poke Cassiopeia or outright kill her before she can get into range. Furthermore, Cassiopeia is very susceptible to ganks, since both her W and ultimate only extend in a cone in front of her, making her very susceptible to being flanked.
Die by my hand, and rise anew.
Karthus, the Death Singer. Karthus is the second machine gun mage, though he is unique because his spammable spell is AoE, which gives him amazing wave clear and allows him to do a frightening amount of damage in constricted areas where the enemies are bunched too closely together. What Karthus is really known for is his ultimate, which deals damage to every champion on the map regardless of location. This ability can guarantee kills for Karthus against any low health enemy and gives him insane global pressure. Enemy teams have to completely change how they play the game if there's a Karthus in the game. They have to recall at much higher health. They have to be extremely wary of extended trades. Finally, they have to be much more careful when executing tower dives or other risky plays. While proper use of Karthus' Q and ultimate are what separates a good Karthus from a bad one, proper use of his W is what makes Karthus great. Karthus has only one CC ability in his kit, his W. His W is the only way that Karthus can reliably lock down an enemy and kill them, and it is also the only reliable way that Karthus can disengage or escape from a poor fight. Not only that, but anyone who passes through Karthus' wall also has their magic resistance reduced by 15%, allowing him to do even more damage to enemies. Proper use of this ability is often what determines whether Karthus gets a kill or is killed himself. However, death is not as bad for Karthus as it is for other champions. Karthus' passive allows him to defy death for 7 seconds and plays an extremely important role in how he teamfights. In teamfights, Karthus' job is to deal as much AoE damage as possible before dying. Once dead, Karthus continues to use his spells to deal as much damage as possible before channeling his ultimate, which is uninterruptible when he's dead. Both good Karthus players and bad Karthus players will typically have more deaths than the average player, but a good Karthus player will also deal some of the highest damage in the game and also have an amazing kill participation.
I read the runes. You lose.
RYZE, the Rune Mage. RYZE is the last machine gun mage that we're going to talk about, and also one of the highest skill cap champions in the game. This is evident by the massive discrepancy in win rate between beginner RYZE players and expert RYZE players. New RYZE players have an average win rate of around 30%, while expert RYZE players typically have a win rate that's double that. Do not be fooled by RYZE's overall low win rate. He is extremely powerful in the right hands, and he is a common pick at the pro level. In the right hands, not only can RYZE duel most champions in the game, but he can also push waves extremely quickly. RYZE is one of the only champions in the game with a point-and-click route, which gives him insane pick potential. Once RYZE has locked down a target, he can barrage them with a flurry of spells. However, RYZE can alter the order of his spells to either maximize damage, maximize its defenses, or get a blend of both. This is what really separates a good RYZE from a bad one. Knowing your combos, having the finger speed to execute them properly, and having knowledge to adjust your combos on the fly is something that can take hundreds of games to master. What separates a good RYZE from an expert RYZE is proper use of his ultimate. RYZE can use his ultimate in a near infinite number of ways. Most commonly, it's used to collapse on an overextending enemy, or finish off a low health enemy that is fleeing. However, it can also be used as an escape if you're ganked by multiple people. It can also be used as an escape after a dive when you're stuck behind enemy lines. It can even be used to initiate a tower dive, allowing you to appear behind the tower or even bring an extra minion wave with you. Also, RYZE can combine his ultimate with other champions' AoE ultimates for devastating effect. In the late game, RYZE can use his ultimate to allow his team to bypass vision around Baron or Drake, allowing his team to take those objectives without the enemy team noticing. RYZE can also use his ultimate to teleport minions from one lane to another, allowing him to stack up a massive wave that allows his team to push down inhibitor turrets much easier. RYZE can even use his ultimate to teleport minions to the enemy team's fountain, allowing him to safely dive the enemy team in their fountain without dying.
Go ahead, be negative. You'll be just my type.
VLADIMIR, the Crimson Reaper. VLADIMIR is the second sustained mage in the game, with the first being SWAIN. Unlike SWAIN, VLADIMIR does not use mana. Instead, some of his abilities cost health, while his Q and ultimate allow him to regain health. Because he can regain health very rapidly using his Q, and he doesn't require any mana, VLADIMIR is excellent in extended laning phases. He can pretty much always outlast his opponent and force them to back before him, allowing him to gain a gold and EXP advantage. However, VLADIMIR doesn't have much kill pressure in the early levels. His goal is just to farm up as much as possible and out-sustain his opponent in lane. Once VLADIMIR gets some items is where he really begins to shine. VLADIMIR's passive allows him to gain a percentage of his maximum health as AP and a percentage of his AP as health. What this effectively does is it makes each item that VLADIMIR buys more cost-effective than it would be on another champion. Essentially, for each item VLADIMIR buys, he gets an extra couple hundred gold in raw stats, which is what allows him to scale so well. In the late game, VLADIMIR can feel near unkillable due to his large health pool, the massive damage he deals, and the massive amount of life that he can heal. VLADIMIR is also extremely unique because his ultimate causes all enemies hit by it to take 10% more damage from all sources. This means that not only does it increase VLADIMIR's damage by 10%, but it increases the damage of your entire team by 10%. There is no ability in the game that can single-handedly increase your team's damage output like a VLADIMIR ultimate. If you can land a 5-man ultimate with VLADIMIR, then you can pretty much guarantee that your team a victory, thanks to the massive utility that his ultimate provides. What VLADIMIR is susceptible to is crowd control and focus fire. VLADIMIR has a very short range on all of his abilities and no hard crowd control in his kit. He relies on being able to run down his opponents in order to kill them. Crowd control and focus fire prevent him from doing this. However, VLADIMIR's W allows him to avoid crowd control. Proper use of VLADIMIR's W is everything, because it has a very high health cost, but it makes you untargetable while still allowing you to move. The goal when playing VLADIMIR is to use his pool to dodge the enemy team's key crowd control or damaging abilities. Fail to do this, and you'll die before you get in range to deal any damage or steal any life from your opponents.
Oblivion awaits.
MALZAHAR, the Prophet of the Void. MALZAHAR is the only battle mage in the game that is primarily played as support, but he can also be played in the mid lane. Additionally, MALZAHAR's skill order is extremely different from player to player. What I'm showing you on the screen is the most common skill order that I've seen, but there are some people who max QWE, there's some who max WEQ, and pretty much any other combination in between. What makes MALZAHAR so versatile is his high DPS damage, his multiple forms of crowd control, and his voidlings. In the early game, MALZAHAR's voidlings can do a scary amount of damage. Every time a voidling attacks a champion, it spawns another voidling, magnifying the damage that his voidlings can do. The only way to prevent this damage is to run away or focus fire the voidlings, allowing MALZAHAR to gain an advantage in lane. Once MALZAHAR gains access to his Q and E, he has a consistent way of dealing DPS damage to champions and silencing them to prevent retaliation. However, each of MALZAHAR's abilities costs a decent amount of mana, so it's very easy to run out of mana if you just spam your abilities. Where MALZAHAR gets most of his power though is his passive and his ultimate. MALZAHAR's passive gives him a shield that makes him invulnerable to crowd control after not being damaged for a certain period of time. This passive allows MALZAHAR to play much more aggressive than a traditional squishy champion would. MALZAHAR's ultimate is a point-and-click, channeled suppression that locks down a target for 2.5 seconds. It's arguably the best ability in the game at locking down a single enemy. This single target lockdown gives MALZAHAR insane pick potential. It makes him a fearsome initiator when he has flash up. Furthermore, MALZAHAR's ultimate acts as a fantastic deterrent to keep assassins and divers from engaging onto your backline, since the suppression can stop even the most fed assassin dead in his tracks. So which of these battle mages is your favorite? Also, what kind of battle mages do you think RYZE should develop in the future? Once again, if you have any questions on any of the battle mages that we discussed in this video, please leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it or at least point you in the right direction. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know which subclass you want me to do next in the comments below. And of course, if you've made it this far in the video and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my videos. I hope you all have a fantastic day. This is Randomonium, signing off.